that's not where I want to go with this talk. I want to talk about the shadow self, which is essentially an aspect of ourself that we generally hide from other people. So there's a story that talks about every human having three faces. There's the face that they show the world, and the way that I describe that to current culture is your Instagram, your fucking highlight reels. Like, I'm awesome! Look at everything cool that I've done. That's the one face that everyone's really comfortable sharing. Then you have the other face that is just generally with like your close loved ones, like when you're feeling vulnerable and you feel like you didn't do well and you can lean on your coach or your loved one or your parents or somebody like that. And then the third face is the face that only you know about yourself. When you look in the mirror, it's that aspect of yourself that you're not super comfortable talking about even with your loved ones, your dark desires or your frustrations or your rage or all this stuff that oftentimes we, maybe suppress because we're not used to just accepting that that's part of who we are. So this is one thing that I think all of us at Training Think Tank have in common. However, I don't want this to be negative and weird, or too negative and weird. I'm always a little weird. We also share in common that we have our highest self, the best version of ourselves that we possibly can be, and how we express ourselves to other people, how we communicate, how we think. When we step into a competitive environment, did you let your anxiety get a hold of you? Were you scared of the pain? Were you scared of losing? If you can silence all of that stuff and find just your best self, not necessarily the one that you idealize, but your best self is kind of the higher self. And when I was building Training Think Tank as a culture, my higher self, I was only 25-ish when I started it, and I had the idea that I wanted to create a training community. And my higher self thought of three main things that I wanted to do in the world of strength and conditioning CrossFit. The first was I thought athletes got really bad information about how to get better. I thought, especially in CrossFit, there was this like toxic toughness. Like, oh, any pain that you're going through, don't be a pussy, go harder. And people would just keep doing that over and over again until they couldn't bend over or their knees hurt so bad. And there was just no real thought about having longevity and taking care of yourself and thinking about it being maybe a decade-long journey to be able to reach your goals. So one was getting information to athletes, which I think a lot of you would vibe with. A lot of you are athletes and aspiring to be athletes, so it's part of what got you connected here. Two was trying to professionalize coaching. I think in the industry as a market, you think of a coach, and oftentimes it's somebody that couldn't be a lawyer or couldn't be a doctor or couldn't be some like really cool high profile job, and it kind of transitioned into like, oh, I'm a coach. I hated that, and I thought that we had a real problem educating young people or even educating older people on what to do with their bodies to be healthy and to be vital. So trying to professionalize coaching, and it's one of the reasons why we have, I think, 12 now people who are considered full-time coaches working for Training Think Tank, because I had this desire to surround myself with people that took that profession seriously. And then the last thing was kind of just more related to health. It's not really relevant here. But those were like my higher self purposes. However, I wouldn't be lying if that shadow self of me, who didn't like who I was, didn't think that I was worthy, had this rage inside that always wanted to dominate and always wanted to win, wasn't a part of why I set the culture up. And it's part of the reason I think ultimately now we were successful, because I had this burning insecurity really that kept me fired up for a really long time through a lot of perceived losses. So if I were to try to say like that shadow self that I started when I was younger has kind of died. But if you analyze, let's say in 2015, you said, hey, I'm going to look at Max objectively as a coach in CrossFit. And we say winning is what Max was aspiring to. I was trying to be a winning coach and put somebody on top of the podium at the CrossFit Games. Travis was really the only high-profile person that I worked with. We went to the CrossFit Games in year one and took 18th. And I was like, wow, I thought he was a lot better than that. What did we do wrong? So we went And he did too. I mean, the truth is, like, that's just where we were. We were going out there to compete, to try to get on top of the podium, and then you realize you go there and you get kicked in your face and you end up in 18th, and you're like, okay, I guess we have to have a better approach. We have to get better. So we go through a whole year collecting data, training, running training camps, having him fly out to Utah to do as much hard stuff as we possibly can do to get his mind prepared. He goes back to the CrossFit Games and he takes 29th. I was like, oh God, my soul. So I thought, like, again, my shadow self is like, you're a loser. You're a loser coach. You need to double down and you need to get better. You need to figure out how this could be. So we double down again. We move to Atlanta and we start setting up training think tank in here. I start training Travis in person. We start making strides. His training's going great. He goes to regionals and he doesn't qualify for the CrossFit Games. Which then, again, it reinforces that concept where you're like, wow, I really need to consider what we're doing. Had I allowed this insecurity, this negativity, this losing, the self-shame to dictate whether or not I kept going in the journey, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have ever had other coaches and started to build this more robust community. So at some point, this kind of younger shadow self, I still think I have my demons and my things that I probably wouldn't tell you guys, but this part of me that was super young, that only thought that I could have self-confidence if I was a winning coach, had kind of died in the development of building the community. However, I was not willing to accept at that point that I was a loser coach, and I started to have to think about how do I construct a narrative around who I am in a way that builds the culture. And that's when the thought that I put in my head that I kept reinforcing was that I am a championship coach. Now, there's definition of the champion of what you guys probably know and you think of. A person who has defeated or surpassed all rivals in competition, especially in sports. So you guys all know your champions of CrossFit. Tia, Froning, Frazier, all these people that have been up and won, and they've been the dominant entities. And a lot of times people are aspiring to be that. However, there's another definition in the dictionary called, or says, a person who fights or argues for a cause or on behalf of somebody else. And I thought to myself as I was kind of building a better sense of self-esteem that anybody in that context can be a champion. And I don't mean it like, hey, you can take last place and walk around with the pride like you beat everybody else. But the behaviors of fighting for yourself, of fighting for your dreams, of trying to find your highest self, of pushing yourself to your absolute limits to try to accomplish what you want and fight for it is what makes you a champion, or at least one definition of it. And ironically, if you put yourself into this headspace for years and years at a time, you actually make yourself much more likely to actually shift into what you think of with commonly like, what is a champion? So I started thinking, okay, Training Think Tank is a championship organization. We might not yet have the person who won the CrossFit Games, but we've had people won semifinals, the Open, quarterfinals, regionals, and keep putting people in the highest positions. It's like, okay, let's continue to cultivate what it means to be a championship culture. And what I think of that is some sort of interconnected championship behavior. And this is how I conceptualize TTT and kind of this community itself. You have all these people. You have champions, contenders, beginners, people that are into it for fitness, teen athletes, masters athletes, weekend warriors, media that is going to share our culture to other people, and coaches that are going to try to help athletes cultivate that championship behavior. And everybody has a right in this context to feel proud of the work that they put in to be the best version of themselves that they can be, knowing that everybody is not destined to be Matt Frazier. Even if you set out to win the CrossFit Games for 6 straight years, the likelihood that that happens, first of all, you probably have to start that journey at like 10 or 12 and get the perfect subset of development over all of those years and step in and happen to be a great competitor. Now, if that doesn't happen and your only context is winning, then you lose all of the beauty of the journey and building a healthy sense of self-esteem without relying on a game. Like, we just played a game over there. It was just a fun, stupid game. And we had a champion of that game. That is essentially what the CrossFit Games is. It's just amplified, and in society we think of as cool. If whoever lost that competition goes home and feels bad about that, it's silly. It was just a game. Like, we practiced for 5 minutes. You've never done some of those things. You did it under pressure. I was yelling go before people were ready. People were like, that's kind of what the CrossFit Games is. And having your self-worth tied just to that, I think, is a silly notion. However, it doesn't stop me from trying to help people want to win, because I still like showing up to competitions and winning. It still feels good. It still feels good to have that work rewarded. But if your whole context is that you're a loser and you hate yourself anytime it doesn't happen, you just end up spending every single step of your journey making yourself miserable and undermining your confidence. So you get to your big moment and you step out and you're like, but I'm a loser. Because in your head, you've been telling yourself you're a loser for however long it happened. So what I am going to try to do throughout this camp is give you guys championship coaching principles. The first, and this will be like in all your feedback, in all the talks, why we do the breakouts, it's thinking about long-term development. If you want to be great, no matter where you are in the spectrum on here, it's still a long process. So you got big ambitions for next season. That means you got like 10 months of training really hard to try to stay healthy and keep getting better just to have your next shot at a competition. Or you're a teen athlete, you want to win the CrossFit Games, you might be training for 6 years before you ever have a chance to step on the competition floor. You age up in 3 years to the next master's category, and that's your focus. Having a mindset that tries to get you better over the long term will help you prevent injury. It'll help you actually enjoy yourself. It'll help you make good decisions. And so all of our coaches will try to speak to you in a context of, yes, we want you to be better tomorrow, but there's only so much progress you can make in that period of time. And if you don't think about how do I develop myself long term, you'll probably never get to your highest self that we're going to try to strive for. Next would be observation, evidence, and data. So what works for you? What do we see in the CrossFit Games? What are the tests? How fast are people going? What are people's 1RMs in all the big lifts? What's the current science telling us? That's kind of where we're getting some of our information to be able to share ideas with you on how you can get better moving forward. Then, relationships, training partners, coaches, PTs, family support structures when shit goes bad, sports psychologists. All of these relationships are the key to getting to that higher self. Nobody gets there without people and help of other people. So you can lean on us for some of that. You can also lean on the people in here. A lot of people here are like-minded. They want to get better. They're here for a reason. They probably would like, even if they're shy, to be connected to other people. So introduce yourself to them and try to foster relationships that will help you get to the next level, because it's championship behavior. Individualization. I'm a CrossFitter-ish. I'm 245 pounds. I've had knee surgery. I've broken my ankle. I've got shoulder surgery. I've herniated discs in my back. I'm running this business. I got to train differently than Caden. He's 16 years old and he's just getting into training. His body weight is half of mine. The impact of everything that we're doing is going to be different. That's an extreme example, but that's true of everybody in here. Depending on where you came from, where your athletic background is, where your goals are, where you want to go, some of the information that you're going to get should be tailored specifically to who you are, which is why we have those breakout groups to, again, help you get to that highest level. Purposeful competition. That one's simple. Compete for a reason. Ultimately, like, my shadow self wanted to compete to make myself feel better. I didn't like who I was, and I thought winning would make me feel better. And in some ways, it is kind of like a drug. It does feel good to win, and you kind of keep going back to it. But if it's filling some sort of void in terms of who you are inside, at some point, that'll come out. And at some point, it won't be as meaningful. So I always try to encourage people to pick a reason why you're doing this. When you're young, it could be that you have an idol and you want to do it. But that changes. And then you actually get there, and now it's not just this nice, pretty dream that you had when you were young. It's like, oh, now this is your life. You get up, you train 8 hours a day. Your elbow hurts? Cool, rehab it, get it better so you can do more strength training on it. And the whole process changes. So being in touch with who you are at every stage, at the end of a competition, at the end of a long season, at the end of a tough training session, and really deciding, hey, this is why I'm doing it, is way more important than people give credit for. The mind's desire to win is one of the most powerful things that oftentimes people are not thinking about. And then striving towards peak potential. We do all of this through something that is on this seal that says corpus animus, which is really just a balance of your mind and your body. That was a concept that was from Greek philosophy thousands of years ago, that essentially every human is a combination of this fleshy body and this ethereal mystery thing, your brain, your thoughts, this metaphysical aspect of who you are. And I thought, oh, that's a really good concept to apply to sports. In CrossFit, from a physical perspective, you got to be good at strength and skills. Gymnastics, barbell, strongman, jump rope skills. And then endurance, metcons, and cyclical. That's the physical stuff that we're going to do in training. Like that test out there, that's a way to improve your feel of a jump rope, your speed off the floor, your ability to control the speed of the whip, the tightness of your rope. All of that stuff can be developed with games like that, not just by pounding volume of doing double unders all the time. Then, outside of the physical, we have the mental aspects of CrossFit. Pacing workouts, having purpose in why you're doing what you're doing, setting goals that you actually give a shit about, performing under pressure. Some people, if I gave you those tests and you were at home by yourself without me yelling, you probably would have crushed them. But when you have other people and you're looking at them face to face and you're in a new environment, people are screaming, it's quick, you're not super clear on what the workouts are, all of that is essentially competition skill that you can cultivate inside your head, how to keep clarity and centered and just focus on the work the best you can. Then technical cues, and the last one's dealing with adversity. I hope that this camp doesn't bring anybody adversity, but these are the mental characteristics that cultivate a championship mindset that we're going to try to help with. Now to do that, to put it into practice, I would say meet people. You'll meet your coaches, you'll meet other athletes, we'll have a team workout where you'll have partners, so you'll get an opportunity to train with other people, because not everything we're doing here is like open camp specific, like we're getting ready for the open. We're just kind of thinking of it more like training and competition and an opportunity to push ourselves. Then athletes who are not in your group, ways you can get better. We're going to have skill breakouts where we teach you some of the fundamentals of skills. We're going to obviously do metcons and strength work, which is what you want to do. Everyone's going to get individual feedback, environmental arousal. A lot of you guys, I'm guessing, train at home, or you train in garages, or you're one of the only people that are competitive in your gym, and some people might look at you like, ooh, why do you take this so seriously? This is an environment of people that are much more dedicated, and there's going to be a lot of fitter people here, so it's an opportunity to get yourself amped up to try to find that higher self. And then movement assessment. Kyle's going to run through a movement assessment to try to help you guys understand how to think about how your bodies move in space, so that way you can change them. The structure of how we're going to do this, the camp schedule. On this bathroom wall, there's a